Okay, so I'm going to apologize right off the bat because this kind of video, it's a weird one. We're taking a look at two players from two separate teams and we're talking about them in one video, and we're kind of connecting the two here. Now, I had to make this video title the way it is because I kind of just wanted to go literal. Like, there isn't really a way that I can twist this narrative to make it appealing to an audience, so Sens news, Canucks news, talking about Sokolov and Tanner Pearson over here. Let's talk today about our topic because I swear, it's a weird one at face value, but it does make sense when you get into it a little bit more. Today, as we noted, we're talking about Ottawa Senators 2020 draft pick Egor Sokolov, and we're also talking about Vancouver Canucks middle six winger Tanner Pearson. Now, why exactly are we talking about these two guys here today? Well, because one of these players provides a really good kind of, let's just say, reference point to the development of the other, and furthermore, I kind of just want to talk to Canucks fans about the latter of the two over here. So before we get into the Vancouver portion of the video, let's talk about why we're even bringing up Vancouver in this conversation over here. Let's go over Egor Sokolov, who, as we noted, is an Ottawa Senators guy. He was a 2020 second-round pick, taken 61st overall by the Sens. Now, you take a look at his profile right here. June 7th, 2000 was the birth date, meaning that he was indeed a double-overager when he was selected by the Senators in the second round of the 2020 draft. He is 6'4", 240. Man, what a big guy right there. He's also a winger who is a right-handed shooter. He's a guy who, if you take a look at the scouting report back from the 2020 draft, he used the threat of his big shot a couple of times tonight to freeze the defense and thread the puck inside the defensive box to a teammate in a shooting position. Sokolov remains more of a shooter, but he has developed a setup ability too. When he was selected by the Ottawa Senators in 2019-20, he was a double point-per-game player. 92 points, 52 games played for the Cape Breton Screaming Eagles in the QMJHL, as well as a beast for Team Russia at the World Juniors. He had 4 points in 7 games played over there. And I know, you might be asking yourself, okay, why exactly was Egor Sokolov taken 2 years after his draft eligibility? What exactly was he doing in the previous few seasons that made him undraft-worthy? Well, in his first season of draft eligibility, 2017-2018, he had himself 42 points in 64 games played for the same Cape Breton Screaming Eagles team. Now, that's all fine and dandy, and it's not terrible, but his skating was so poor in 2017-2018, he actually had to relearn how to skate from scratch. There was an Athletic article published about this entire story over here, how in the summer of 2018 he had to go out and get himself a brand new skating coach. He had really good size, he had really good instincts, and his shooting ability was unparalleled, but his skating was so bad that he really needed to just relearn all the fundamentals that went into the process. Now, the year after that, he was still good, 57 points, 68 games played, but in 2019-20, that's when he really took off and was a double point per game player, one of the top QMJHL players in the entire league in terms of scoring. If you want to take a look at the actual number over here, hey, he was third, behind Hovanov and Lafreniere. Ever since then, though, Senators fans have been super hyped up for him because in his first season with the AHL's Belleville Senators in 2020-2021, hey, guess what? He had 25 points in 35 games played, 15 goals, too, for the Senators, which, as a 20-year-old, is certainly not bad. He came out here as the top point producer on the team, which is actually quite noteworthy because he had a whole bunch of guys that just really didn't produce all too much. Sokolov was the best on the team, bar none, which was giving a whole bunch of Ottawa Senators fans hope that Sokolov could make himself a pretty good impression as an NHL prospect. Now, it's difficult to project that, especially as a guy who was drafted as a double-overager, but we have ourselves what is an interesting enough profile to take a look at when it comes to a potential comparison. Here is a tweet on Twitter from Byron Bader. He's a guy who posts advanced analytics and draft NHL potential data, which is really interesting and intriguing to the point of conversation because it allows you to really compare these players with historical performances with other guys you might recognize. Take a look at this tweet over here. Egor Sokolov's production progression is a dead ringer for Tanner Pearson. Take a look at this. This is the comparable right here, the graphic that is posted onto Twitter. Egor Sokolov compared to LA Kings draft pick Tanner Pearson, who has an oddly similar profile to Sokolov in the way that he has developed. You take a look at where these guys were in terms of their NHL E scores, which is their NHL Equivalency Ratings. What this means pretty much is they take a look at prospects in their draft -1s or their draft years, and they compare them historically based off of size, weight, position, and production to other NHL players who have exhibited similar traits in previous years, and they come up with a score that indicates how well these players and their numbers would transition into the NHL, which is where the name comes from, an NHL equivalency score. Dmitry Sokolov, in his draft -1 year, so before he was even in the QMJHL, he had himself an NHL equivalency score of 9, which is not good. Tanner Pearson had himself a similar number at 8. And it's really interesting because you take a look at how these guys have progressed, and you can see right here, from their draft -1s to their draft years, to their draft +1 years, and their draft +2 years, this is where Sokolov was drafted, their equivalency numbers have been so similar that it's so uncanny how faithful Sokolov is following Tanner Pearson's overall progression. Why is that, might you ask? Well, it's because Tanner Pearson was also a double-overager when he was drafted by the LA Kings in 2012. He was born in 1992 in August, meaning that he was eligible for the 2010 draft. Now, Sokolov wasn't drafted in his initial draft year because his skating was bad and his numbers weren't really fantastic. Pearson wasn't drafted in his draft year either because he was playing in the GOJHL, which is Junior B hockey in Ontario. Well, sometimes it's Junior A. It says on Wikipedia they're typically referred to as Junior B, but sometimes are Junior A. It's not the OHL. And he made the OHL the season after that, was pretty okay with the Barrie Colts. He was a 42-point guy in 66 games. The next season, though, he went off. 91 points, 60 games played. Even though he was a double-overager, he was 20 years old, he was drafted in 2012 by the LA Kings at the end of the first round, 30th overall. Now, as Sokolov did after he got drafted out of the QMJHL, Pearson went straight to the AHL after being selected, where for the Manchester Monarchs he was a pretty good 47-point in 64-game guy. Since then, though, Pearson has had up and down seasons where he has played in LA and Manchester, eventually playing for that 70s line in the 2014 playoffs. He won a Stanley Cup, no big deal, half a point a game over there in the postseason, and was a mainstay in the LA Kings middle six the rest of the way there. A 30, 40-point guy, 20-goal guy as well. He eventually got bounced around to the point where he was in Pittsburgh, and then he went over to Vancouver, and his first calendar year in Vancouver was fantastic. At the end of the 2018-19 season, he was under a point per game, 12 points, 19 games played, and he had 9 goals too. I think he was the top goal guy on the team when he came here. And then in 2019-20, his first full season with Vancouver, 45 points, 69 games played. You do the math on that, and you multiply things out by 82. Tanner Pearson was on pace for 50 points, and that's a really good player right there, especially in the middle six. He was really good in the postseason too, 8 points, 17 games played over there, but despite the fact that Pearson had a pretty good start to Vancouver, his previous year was pretty lackluster. 18 points, 51 games played. Now, a whole bunch of people in the Canucks had really down years in terms of numbers, and Pearson was no exception. His season was so poor, though, that a lot of Canucks fans were kind of looking towards the future and saying, okay, maybe he leaves in free agency. Maybe they just don't re-sign him and he goes somewhere else. Sayonara, Tanner Pearson. But no. He re-signed till 2024 at a $3.25 million AAV. Now, for a player who put up 18 points in 51 games, that sucks. It really does. That's not a good number right there. But you gotta take a look at it in the big picture, man. Tanner Pearson, during his entire tenure with Vancouver, has been fantastic. Let's say 75% of the time. That's the end of the 2018-19 stint, the full 2019-20 stint, and the postseason in 2019-20 in the bubble. If you look at everything holistically, Tanner Pearson was in general a pretty good middle six defensively minded forward who could pot in some goals once in a while. So for Ottawa Senators fans, if you're taking a look at Egor Sokolov, a second-round guy you drafted who was a double-overager, and you see similar traits and progression to Tanner Pearson, you should be pretty happy with that. Now, I do think that Sokolov and his goal-scoring ability and his offensive tools, his overall game's a lot less well-rounded than Tanner Pearson's is right now. I do think Tanner Pearson, relative to the profile that Sokolov represents, is a little bit more of a well-rounded two-way guy who can produce, rather than the goal-scoring big beast that Sokolov is, who needed to work on his skating, but who ended up doing that successfully. So, who knows if these guys really project into similar traits into the future, but I just thought it would be a crazy interesting idea to talk about the progression of Igor Sokolov over here as one of the top Ottawa Senators prospects that Sens fans are super excited for, and for good reason, because you never really see guys taken in the second round, especially just from 1 year ago, do this well, this quickly, so much to the point that they're projected as the same way as a guy who is a solidified middle six player in the NHL today. Talk to me in the comments, though. What do you think about Egor Sokolov and his prospect profile? For Tanner Pearson, I mean, your guess is as good as mine as to how he's going to produce next season, because he'll likely be in a third-line role. We have the top six of the Lotto line, as well as Horvat, Höglander, and Garland. So Pearson will probably play with Podkolzin and Dickinson, so we'll see how exactly he'll produce over there. But talk to me in the comments if you're a Sens fan about Egor Sokolov, and if you're a Canucks fan, talk to me in the comments about Tanner Pearson. Do you believe in this guy? Do you think he can be better? Do you think that contract is going to pay off? Let me know in the comments, what do you think about these two players? I hope you enjoyed this video. Josh Wilson 99, and bye.